This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. And I don't think that was too painful. I think we did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We are back in the dark room. We're talking Lovecraft today. Coming in hot after Castaneda and Dante. Yeah. That was a 1-2 punch, man. We had some flim flam. We visited the underworld. Getting good feedback about those episodes, Brad. People seem to like it.
Yeah, no, and they were fun to do. And they were, it's, these marathon sessions sometimes line up. We do one and we do the other, and it's we feel like we've got some momentum. So it's fun. Yeah.
And then we sleep. Yeah. But not for too long. Not for too long. And we're joined today by another Kelly, believe it or not. I am being swamped. Mm-hmm. I'm going mad from Kelly's. Matthew Kelly is here of Dark Pony Radio. Matthew, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Just got back from vacation, which has been rough, but fun. At the same time.
The vacation wasn't rough, but the return was rough.
The return was rough. The vacation was exactly what was needed.
Oh, good.
All right.
Good.
Right on. Yeah. Well, and Matthew is local to the Twin Cities. And let me get a plug in here, Matthew. Anyone here in the greater metro area in Minnesota, we'll even let you come over from Wisconsin. We are doing a reading of my new play thing that I co-wrote with Abby Lucas next Monday, September 18th. At Waldman Brewery. You can find the information at badmouthtc.com. If you're listening to this in the future, you can still get over to badmouthtc.com. We put a lot of content there, a lot of radio play type stuff. The reading's free. It's a new play called The Edge of Liberty. It is a new comedy about liberty-minded niche internet micro celebrities exploring the frayed edges of freedom in contemporary America. It is a sex comedy. You are not going to want to miss The Edge of Liberty from Badmouth Theater Company, Waldman Brewery, September 18th, in the foul year of our Lord 2023. Thank you, Matthew, for giving me time to make that plug. Anybody in the Twin Cities, anybody around the area, come out. We're not putting this one online yet. So if you want to say, I saw The Edge of Liberty first, I was early, you're going to want to get out and actually do it. And I'm just going to plow ahead here. While we're plowing, I'm gonna plow ahead and say we have an After Dark prepared for today's episode where we talk with Matthew about H.P. Lovecraft, a very popular topic. People love Lovecraft. Mm-hmm. I know Brad has something prepared for the After Dark. This is for Patreon only, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Every episode, a bonus mini episode. We did it for Dante. We did it for Castaneda. This is the way. This is the way, the truth, and the Patreon. You want to get in there. Brad and I are building a pod. We've had some nice steady growth on Patreon. Would love to see a big jump in numbers sometime, but we appreciate the nice steady growth. If you want more independent media, truly independent media, codependent media, that's us, right? So support us. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. Legitimately, you make the show. If you support us, you're putting, there's no middlemen here. All right. There are mid men here, but there are no middlemen. All right. So, and Patreon, they take their cut, they get the VIG, but most of it ends up in our pockets, and it inspires us to continue to put in hours and hours and hours of work into this show. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. What do we have for the After Dark, Brad?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit, and it's going to be, it's going to jump off of something else we're going to at least touch on in the core episode, but we're going to talk about the relationship between Lovecraft's At the Mountain of Madness and a pretty wild internet conspiracy rabbit hole about just what the heck is going on down in Antarctica.
Ooh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And I, on the After Dark, am going to peck around and find some fun links and find some goofy stuff about the Metallica Lovecraft connection.
Nice.
My teenage daughter is a certified metalhead on her own. She became a metalhead. She's listening to Lamb of God now. She's going in directions I never even went, and she sends me stuff, and I'm like, this is very, very hard. This is heavy. And she goes, I didn't think there was anything. I'm taking her to Tool on Halloween. It is going to be, it is awesome. I'm a very proud father. And Metallica, she loves Metallica. So I am getting Metallica pilled all over again. It's like I'm on my paper route again, 14, 15 years old, listening to this stuff. And I had completely repressed or forgotten the Metallica connection to Lovecraft. Lots of Lovecraftian Metallica songs.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that on the After Dark.
And then, of course, anything that's sort of left on the cutting room floor from the main episode as well, as always.
Sure. The bloody, bleeding cutting room floor, with all the tentacles, you step off the wrong, the eldritch, shockingly eldritch cutting room floor. Well, Matthew, that was a protracted intro. So can you tell people about yourself? What is your interest in Lovecraft? Tell people about Dark Pony Radio, where they can find you.
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah.
First off, I'm a co-owner of a theater company local in town called Shadow Horse Theater. And that's kind of where a lot of originally my art and creativity and theater all came out of school and improv and people and whatever random thing I could do in college. But now it is morphed into Dark Pony Radio Show, which is the podcast that we write, which is mostly horror fiction, because I love dark, creepy things, and although it seems like the world does too. Mm-hmm. So I love making people feel uncomfortable, performance-wise, not in real life. That's just weird. But as far as like performing, yes. And I got into Lovecraft, not like everybody else did. Like I'd heard Lovecraft, I'd known certain Lovecraftian things, but I didn't start reading them until maybe like 4 years ago. Actually, like sitting down and reading the novellas and the short stories. Up till that point, I just knew of things here or there and connections and what was what, but nothing substantial. Then I started reading. Then we did an episode or 2 episodes actually for our podcast, our radio show at Mountains of Madness, and then I wrote a sequel / adaptation for Mountains of Madness with a little bit of the Nameless City rolled into it.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
So had our own take on the Lovecraft lore.
Awesome.
With it as well. So it's, finding the connections, even with Edgar Allan Poe, things like that, all the way through. I mean, even Del Toro, one of my favorite film people, there are all those connections of just like throughout my horror and throughout my journey as far as being creative has always been there. I just never really like focused on it.
Yeah, he's sort of Lovecraft is sort of there and countless places, really,
Mhm.
isn't he? When you get into the creepy, dark side of narrative arts and visual arts too. He's kind of right there. And then he is also sort of the bridge for the people before him too.
Mhm.
It always feels like, right? He's sort of like, there's Poe before him. There's a bunch of other people, Machen before him, and other people. But he feels, for us now, Lovecraft feels like the bridge between kind of what's happening now in that world and what was happening in like the 19th century.
You know how they say that your brain doesn't really fully develop until you're 25? I think mine waited until I was 35 because I did not, at a certain point in my life, I put two and two together and I said, oh, Ghostbusters is a Lovecraftian, just pure Lovecraftian horror comedy. It's
Mhm.
not. It's
Yeah.
not even subtle. It's all just right there in your face. I mean, short of mentioning the Necronomicon. I mean, they talk about Tobin's Spirit Guide or whatever, but
Right.
it's just right there. We
Mhm.
accidentally wrote a Lovecraftian comedy. Abby and I. We wrote a comedy called Doug Must Die.
That's right. That
And
is pretty
when it was
Lovecraftian.
yeah, when it was over, we're like, oh, they're looking after the Necronomicon. They're trying to find the Necronomicon. Like, whoops. Oh, and the fun story about that, I don't know if I've told you this story, Matthew. I may have said it on the pod before, but we finished that screenplay, the script, and it's about a life coach, a junior wannabe life coach from LA whose fiance dies. So she moves to Austin and ends up getting Death as a client. Death works for the IRS, right? So it's about a hacky life coach who gets Death for a client, right? It's a comedy. The big set piece at the end of the script is that they go to the Georgia Guidestones to go find this book, and they blow up the Georgia Guidestones. And we quite literally finished the first draft of the script like a week before they blew up IRL.
Yeah, they actually blew up. That was pretty bizarre, man. I gotta
we
say.
we were texting a little bit. It's like, okay, all right, interesting. What do we have to write next? Somebody
Right.
wins the lottery.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Screenwrite oversexed screenwriters, jet set.
Yeah.
You know,
Fall into money. Yeah. Yeah.
Loved by all. Yeah, well, in any case, yeah, you see it everywhere, the Lovecraftian link. And
Mhm.
now increasingly more explicitly too, they
Mhm.
trade on the name Lovecraft Country and all of this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I
And
wanted
right,
to get
and
into
sort
it,
of
but
rightly so. Yeah. Well, I want to, before we dive too far into it, I want to, because I want to know a little bit more, and I want our audience to know a little bit more about Dark Pony Radio. So it's
sure.
podcast. You have horror fiction. Is this
Mhm.
how do these episodes come together? Is it you writing it?
So,
Is it, yeah, just give
uh,
us a little more juice on that.
sure, sure. It came out of obviously like a love for radio, but trying to not necessarily replicate classic radio because, well, we're not in that time frame. We have cooler, funny, more unique ways of making sound, doing fun things, unique things, modernizing, cinemizing it.
Sure.
So we were trying to look at another avenue of what we could do artistically pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and then we're like, oh, we should fast track this concept because who knows when we'll be on stage again. Um, but we originally took classic radio pieces. So some of the show has some of the classic radio pieces, like Three Skeleton Key, Sorry, Wrong Number,
Mhm.
just to get the ball rolling, getting people accustomed to our hosts, things like that. And then we have slowly been pulling away from that and doing adaptations of other pieces. And also now, I think most of the next season that's coming up, season 3 in October, is going to be almost all original content that has either come out of my brain or workshop together with some other people. But
Very
it's
cool.
yeah, it's kind of like a spatter of all of it. It's very anthological,
Cool.
kind of, but set in this weird dark pony world where our two hosts, the Pale Lady and Dark Gentleman, kind of run things.
Very cool.
And we're going to be introducing a new villain on top of it, and possibly an actual protagonist in the world. We don't know yet, but
Somebody you're rooting for.
uh,
This sounds really
sure.
cool. Yeah, no, it sounds
And
really
just trying
cool.
to just trying to explore horror fiction on all levels, trying to see push the levels of what we can do as far as in the audio first medium. Clearly we can't do the we can do blood and gore, but we can't show the blood and gore. So how do we make that same feeling of you wanting to vomit while watching someone be ripped open, but you just hear it and you know exactly what's happening. So uh, I'm pushing our sound engineer quite a bit this coming season to see what we can do with body horror and other sorts of uncomfortableness. So
very
Aren't
cool.
aren't Abby and I are writing something for this too, right? I have
yes,
to check my
actually,
calendar. Yeah.
it's the first time we're hiring outside writers for production, because we usually bring in featured actors to voice for 2 episodes along with the cast we currently have. And at the end of season 3, our final 2 episodes, Kevin here and Abby are going to be writing that. So I'm excited to see what that's going to be like.
The true horror.
It's going to be but yeah, you know, it's funny you talked about Dante, because we did a whole Inferno. We did a 3-part Inferno saga, which was.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're
intense.
here. We're this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You know, just one thing. I think it's really cool trying to find these, because audio only is clearly its own art form with its own opportunities and limitations that aren't in another medium. So I think that's really interesting, thinking about what you can do with that. But one thing you said, it's something I've been thinking about. And you said sort of during COVID, really, this kind of accelerated a little bit. And our show, we started during COVID. I really think, give it a couple more years, we're going to look back, and then COVID, for all of the, not even to talk about the politics, any of it, I think we're going to realize, like, there was actually like a little creative boom there. A bunch of stuff started. A lot of things kicked off then that are cool, and we're glad they're around. You know, I
think a lot of people were cooped up, and I think I think a lot of people said, okay, enough.
Yeah.
It's time to take this into our own hands. You're nodding, Matthew. Would you agree?
Yeah, I can't remember what I was reading. I think it may have had to do when the Spanish flu hit. There was an uptick in theater and creative work as well. Whenever there's a big world event that just kind of crushes people's souls, entertainment all of a sudden comes out of the woodwork, and everyone looks back and going, oh my gosh, we had a huge upsurge of new writing, new styles, new types of genres, new things that came out in that period specifically.
Yeah, and I feel like every second or third person we talk to on this show has some bit of their self-promotions, like, and yeah, so COVID happened, and what we decided to do was, so I don't know,
we got to call Fauci up and really get people dropping in the streets. We got to revive the culture.
Get right. So one thing you said, you did an adaptation for your radio show of At the Mountains of Madness. What is At the Mountains of Madness to you?
What appealed to me was, first, accessibility for people who want to get into Lovecraft. I feel it's a really easy story to get into without getting that, and a lot of people talk about the Cthulhu one as well, being easy to drop right into the lore. But At Mountains of Madness is so independent and is tied to the lore, but not in depth like some of it. It's very much you could say standalone piece that people, if they want to keep reading into it, they can. If they don't, they're like, I'm good, we're done here.
Right. Yeah.
They can be, and just get the enjoyment of that. So part of that was it. It's also not adapted as often as a lot of the other pieces. It's not talked about as much. I know for a while there was discussion that Guillermo del Toro had the rights to do the film, and I think there's some actual like treatments out there for it. But that got taken down, I don't know, like a couple of years ago. I think that was one of the things that got lost due to COVID. I'm not sure on that. But so there really hasn't been like a film adaptation, like a Hollywood film adaptation, I should say. But to me, I like the idea of madness beyond the creatures, beyond the gore, beyond the lore, like the slow descent, and even the story itself is a descent. And it's like, as they're walking, you're getting as maddening with them as they are.
Maybe I want to talk more about. Let me set it up a little bit. I should have. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, set it up. But I want to say, at our annual retreat at our annual trust exercise in the woods that Brad and I do, where we sit around the fire and sort of torture each other. More than we usually do on the episodes. The private torturing.
Yeah.
Brad, you mentioned that you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
And curiously, you talked about how you started to go crazy at the top of the mountain because of the depletion of oxygen. So Brad too has been at the mountains.
I have been at the mountains of madness. Yeah. Sleep deprivation,
that's a real
and oxygen deprivation will definitely, you'll start seeing things and you'll lose control of your emotional state for sure. And we do get a little bit of that at the Mountains of Madness. For people who maybe are listening to this and this is a Lovecraft story that they haven't read, let me just give the brief kind of, this is what At the Mountains of Madness is. It's the frame of it is, there is a scientific expedition to Antarctica from Lovecraft's Miskatonic University. And this is the first person recounting from the leader of that expedition. This guy, I believe his name is William Dyer. He's the geologist on the team. And he's basically just explaining what happened when they went on this expedition to Antarctica. And his hope is that though some of this story is public, he's hoping that he can prevent other people from going to Antarctica and continuing to explore. And the one thing to keep in mind is when this story was written, it was 1931, I believe Lovecraft wrote it. It didn't come out until 1936. I mean, literally, I think in 1922 was the first time a human set foot at the South Pole. So Antarctica is still very much, in 1931, is still very much the off the map. It's the part of the map that used to say here be dragons, right? It's
be like going to the moon. Going to the moon.
Right. Yeah. So Lovecraft was very particular about getting the details he could get right. About getting those right. And then what was sort of left, he allowed his imagination to flower. And what ultimately they find, they come across some sort of what they sort of think might be fossils, but basically specimens that are a little bit ambiguous in terms of, are they minerals? Are they animals? What are these things? They're in Antarctica, of course, so the conditions are very intense at times. The group gets split up. One part of the group dies in some kind of catastrophe that's not entirely explicable. All of this is very mysterious. It's because it's this first person. William Dyer doesn't always know what's happening. It's sort of it's a little bit vague about how one thing led to another at times. At other times, it is in what I came to love Lovecraft fashion, almost like he spends several pages explaining to you the geoprobe drill that one member of the team invented for the purposes of scientific expedition. Like, it's literally like, I think 3 or 4 pages that he's just explaining how this drill works. So it's very technical on that standpoint, and he explains every little aspect of how the expedition works, like from a if you were putting together an expedition, you could maybe even follow some of these steps that Lovecraft has laid out. Suffice to say, eventually they encounter a mountain range that's clearly not on the maps, that's higher than the Himalayas. They fly over it, and I don't remember if the mountains are part of it, or when they fly over it, they basically discover a city that is some millions of years old. It's like abandoned now. It's like ruins, but it's clearly some millions of years old, built by people who are not humans. And they begin to explore this, and then they learn about the cosmology and the mythology and the lore of this place through looking at murals, basically. Which feels a little bit like a cheat, because Dyer seems to know an awful lot about the intricacies of how they governed themselves and how their food worked and all these other things, just based on looking at some murals. But it's an interesting literary device nonetheless. But so throughout this process, Dyer and the other members of the group either lose their lives or lose their minds, essentially. So that's just kind of a setup for people who haven't listened to it. That's sort of the highest level view, not going too far into too many of the details. So I'm kind of curious, did you find yourself doing your adaptation? Did you find yourself taking big cuts, cutting big chunks of this out?
Eventually, I had to, mostly for time and just uh like I think when I first wrote it, I tried to stay as true to step by step as it could go, and then was like, okay,
Yeah.
we're on page 50.
Right.
Let's cut this back a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
And just like any true adaptation, I had to take some, I don't want to say liberty, but actually make choices for my characters myself a little bit, just to, because it is a radio show, I still need to describe certain things a certain way. We have to do things. There's only one part I was very upset I had to cut just due to
Hmm.
time, but everything else, I think some of the expedition stuff, when they're actually going through the city, I had to cut down and just be like, we're here now, we're here.
Right.
We saw some murals back there. Okay, now we're
Right.
looking at new ones,
Right.
and
Right.
just kind
Right.
of pull
Yeah.
some of the lore out because it does get a lot, and it would get confusing after just listening to it for so long. It would get a lot. You would get lost in just that lore, and I mean, there's something to be said about making the piece be that way, so that when you're just as lost as they are, that would be kind of a fun thing. Um, but I don't want people to turn it off.
Right. Of course. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
how do we find that happy medium?
Yeah.
So,
So, yeah. How do you think it's interesting? Because as I'm reading it, thinking about it from sort of a technical, like the
mhm.
craft of writing standpoint, I got very curious about like how is Lovecraft with this? Because I will tell you. So we were talking before. I read it back when we prepped our deep dive on Lovecraft's life, that episode. But then I was listening to it again in the last couple days just to refamiliarize myself with it, and I realized that like I'm kind of I am freaked out about it. Like it unsettles me, but I'm also
Mhm.
weirdly bored at the same time. And I don't know if any other writer has actually made me feel that particular mix of things before. And what I was curious is like your thoughts, Matthew, was how do you think Lovecraft manages to because a lot of times what a writer does to make a reader feel something is they have a rich character. And William Dyer isn't particularly a rich character, right? He's sort of just matter of fact, this is what happened. How does
and
Lovecraft make us feel what he makes us feel, do you think?
I think because he's such a stock character almost, it does give that intention, at least when I was reading it,
Hmm.
that you are like the way you read, the way you experience, actually you are the Dyer. So it's very much like that POV found footage kind of feel, by making I want, for lack of a better term, a bland character. I mean, he's not bland, but
Right.
he is not. We spend more time hearing about and caring about like Lake and their
Yeah.
team, and all the people that at the end, and all those people we care more about. I
Mhm.
mean, we care about the person that built the drill, like you said.
Right.
Like, I want to know more about that person because
Right. Right.
they name them like their
Yeah.
name is part of the expedition. You're going, what
Yeah.
is happening?
Yeah.
They
And he's like
never.
never even on the
They're just
scene, really. He's,
nope.
yeah.
Yeah, just there, just built the drill and was like,
Right.
go have
Yeah.
fun.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
but
I think there is something to that. It allows you to kind of put yourself in directly into that place. That's a really good point.
and
Yeah.
also, media has changed. So the what we experience from like film, TV, movies, books, are, I won't say quite a bit different, but some, especially with Antarctica being a brand new place, allowing for that much detail, I think is it would be like going to an unknown fantasy world like Tolkien, where we spend how long talking about all the different names of the Fellowship and how many of their families descended upon families, and everyone's like, I'm into this, and it's like, yeah, I,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
but it's almost like he had to create a whole brand new fantasy world because no one's ever been there.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's really well put. And I think, like we were saying, I mean, this came shortly after. So there was this whole period of Antarctic exploration that ended in like the mid 20s. So people are going to, it's not that people know, it's not that a lot of individual people had been there, but there was probably a lot in the air still about Shackleton's expedition and Byrd's expedition and Edmondson's expedition, and maybe you see a grainy, half whited out photo that somebody took from there, right? So it's sort of present, but it's still very mysterious to the public. I would think that it's still, it's there, people are going, but it's still and half the people that go there die, it seems like, and
extremely dangerous. Death is just part of what you sign up for when you go, and so brave, but also like kind of there's probably a little bit of anxiety around colonialism, for lack of a better word, or also like what is left after we explore this. Is the whole world just going to turn back in on itself? And then that sort of expeditionary energy got turned into the moon, and then I guess we went to the moon, and or whatever else, Right. But there's all sorts of weird subterranean feelings, that I imagine Lovecraft was channeling, and the limitations of reason, the limitations of science. Yeah, go on, Matthew.
I mean, you can even talk about Jules Verne in that same essence too. With like During the Center of the Earth, things like that. All these fantastical worlds that really aren't fantastical, but they are. That's all I had.
There is this sense of like, can the world sort of under our feet or right around us be perhaps more mysterious than we really realize? And I mean, that's part of the whole At the Mountains of Madness. It does stand alone as its own book, but of the Lovecraft I've read, it has chapter 8 or 9 is basically William Dyer breaks down his interpretation of all of the murals, and he's going into things like I might even have like a little bit of it here. Like, let me just read this couple paragraphs for people. And this is chapter.
All right, and this is the part of the pod. This is the part of the podcast where Brad reads Lovecraft.
Okay.
I don't think we don't have any, like, we have no bells or whistles, no intro music. Just that's it.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
The full story, so far as deciphered, will shortly appear in an official bulletin of Miskatonic University. Here I shall sketch only the salient highlights in a formless, rambling way. Myth or otherwise, the sculptures told of the coming of those star-headed things to the nascent, lifeless Earth out of cosmic space, their coming and the coming of many other alien entities, such as at certain times embark upon spatial pioneering. They seem able to traverse the interstellar ether on their vast membranous wings, thus oddly confirming some curious hill folklore long ago told me by an antiquarian colleague. They had lived under the sea a good deal, building fantastic cities and fighting terrific battles with nameless adversaries by means of intricate devices employing unknown principles of energy. Evidently, their scientific and mechanical knowledge far surpassed man's today. Okay, he keeps going on like this. Now, there's a part. Let me see if. Hold on,
it's science fiction too. It's a lot of things.
Yeah,
and it's every bit as plausible as Castaneda.
Right. That's a good point. So this is 3 paragraphs later. He's still explaining this, and I'm not going to like hammer this super hard, but I want to like kind of depict how hard he's going on this stuff. Of the life of the old ones, both under the sea and after part of them migrated to land, volumes could be written. Those in shallow water had continued the fullest use of the eyes at the ends of their 5 main head tentacles and had practiced the arts of sculpture and of writing in quite the usual way, the writing accomplished with a stylus on waterproof waxen surfaces. How does he know that? By reading a mural. Those lower down in the ocean depths, though they used a curious phosphorescent organism to furnish light, pieced out their vision with obscure special senses operating through the prismatic cilia on their heads. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a couple paragraphs. Government was evidently complex and probably socialistic, though no certainties in this regard could be deduced from the sculptures we saw. There was extensive commercial, both local and between different cities, certain small flat counters, 5-pointed and inscribed, serving as money. Okay.
There's a guy out there who's against socialism because the old ones were probably socialists.
Right. They had always been.
I get all my. Be careful getting your politics from Lovecraft, okay?
Yeah, let's underline.
Underline that
part. Yes, they seem to have been peculiarly intractable toward the middle of the Permian Age, perhaps 150 million years ago, when a veritable war of resubjugation was waged upon them by the marine old ones. It just keeps, and I'm just reading like a couple sentences from paragraphs. So he's doing this like And I got reading about the sort of history of this story. It was rejected early on by his primary publisher because it was too long, and it eventually came out serialized 5 years after he wrote it in 1936. And uh, Lovecraft kind of thought he did write a couple pieces after this, but he died in 1937, and this is actually sort of the story that ended Lovecraft's I guess, passion for writing in a way. He said something about this work effectively ended my fiction career. And I just got kind of thinking about it as I was reading it, like thinking about is this ending it because he feels like he doesn't have anything else more to say? Like it's sort of the final thesis, or is it he's lost his mojo? I don't know. I don't necessarily expect you guys to have thoughts on that, but it's interesting to read somebody's last thing, and it has this real strident effort to sort of get these details across. I don't know.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end and it's completely different.
Yeah.
Like no detail. This thing happened and now what? And like that's it. And you're like, wait, what?
Right.
It's weird because it does feel like a culmination of all the lore, all the stuff he's been writing. And it also kind of can assume that the reader has read some of his other stuff that would allow for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I haven't gotten to the end of my career of wanting to stop like writing.
Right.
You know, and it could be anything that just took the passion away or just put him in a spot. I mean, everyone stops something for some reason that may not have anything to do with the writing.
This is what I was thinking. I don't know. Brad covered Lovecraft. I know what he's told me, and I used to, in high school and university, I read a bunch of this stuff. So it's been a while. And I know Metallica is really into Lovecraft, and we'll talk about that on the After Dark. But it seems to me like this would be like if Dante had written the Inferno, but then never got out.
Yeah.
And how much of that are you going to do?
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying he was like a one note guy.
No, he wasn't.
I could see why you might just go, I'm putting the quill up. I'm done writing about the old gods that make people insane.
Right.
Well,
there is a kind of a thing, and we don't know that what his take on this piece was in terms of did he think it was his masterpiece. But I could see a thing where you in a writing career where if you did write the thing that you thought, oh, I finally really did it. Like I finally brought to fruition the vision I had. I finally did it. And people are like, nah, this is too long. Or, we don't care. That you might just be like, oh, fuck this. That's it. I'm done. That was it. I mean, what am I going to do? I can't do better than that. I could sort of see that being a motivation or a demotivation, I guess would be the phrase. But
because it like I said, it feels like a standalone episode of everything he has.
Right.
Like almost like a prequel to what is going to happen in this world that we have yet to go. Even though we get all these conversations about them reading the murals like it's like a dictionary.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say that they didn't already have a base understanding of the world that Lovecraft created, of the Necronomicon, of the old gods, of all this already. And it's like it's like Indiana Jones finding that one little bit and going, ha, here we go.
Right.
And it all just kind of comes together.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it definitely was written during a time of like exploration in real world. I mean, that's when we started getting a lot of your archaeologists studying, digging up the world, finding things, finding the ancient cultures. Like that stuff was happening in real time.
Sure. Yeah, and there is, and I think that's kind of what it plays on too. The story plays on these fears of like, if you start digging up, like it might be you might find stuff that's really unsettling, right? Like if you start finding stuff that forces you to like confront what your idea of what this world is, that could be sort of psychologically dangerous for people. And I feel like almost that's the danger that William Dyer is trying to warn people off, more than the threat that you might be killed, though that's there too. There's sort of a like, we opened a box that we're not really ready to look into, and other people shouldn't.
But it's like after the fact, you know?
Yeah, though he is writing it down all for you to read
right?
It, right? But yeah,
that's during the expedition, he's like, "Let's do this."
Right, right.
I'm here for it.
Yeah,
what can we unearth?
Right. And he does once or twice say, William Dyer does once or twice say something about like, you can't understand how compelling it is to have, like trying to justify why they keep going, even though it gets more and more horrible as they go. At one point there's these for people who haven't read it, there's these, this is a cool and one of the more disturbing parts of the whole thing, the 6 foot tall blind albino penguins that the degraded Shoggoths have been harvesting for food for millions of years.
That's so dark.
I that was the part I had to cut out.
Oh, did you?
Because we were doing a read through of it, and they're like, "Why are there fucking penguins here? What is this?" I was like, "Oh,
boys, it's called it the Mountains of Madness." I mean, yeah.
The way he writes it, though, it sets you up for something so horrific, and it does do that bait and switch kind of thing where all of a sudden it's like, what?
Yeah.
And just the thought of seeing them in real life, like in a darkened corridor, hearing penguins, and then you see one that's bigger than you or as big as you, and you're going, okay,
yeah,
I'm either gonna die or this is really cool.
Right.
Yeah,
and it stinks, and it doesn't have eyes, and it's albino. Right. It is kind of unsettling, but a penguin wouldn't be my first choice. Like I'm sitting down, I need to think of an animal that's really going to freak people out. Like a penguin would be pretty low on my list. Yeah,
but it's something so simple, something so real that you would find there, and because I mean they knew of penguins, it wasn't like they didn't.
Right,
they weren't existent, but it's. And I think he even writes it that way of like, it was so normal. That's what was terrifying, is that we've been hearing weird sounds, we've been seeing weird things, smelling, tasting weird things. People have been dying, and there's a penguin now.
Right.
Here's how he describes the Shoggoths.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It was a terrible, indescribable thing, vaster than any subway train, a shapeless congeries of protoplasmic bubbles, faintly self-luminous and with myriads of temporary eyes forming and unforming as pustules of greenish light all over the tunnel-filling front that bore down upon us, crushing the frantic penguins and slithering over the glistening floor that it and its kind had swept, so evilly free of all litter.
Yep.
It goes so hard.
Oh man, I love that stuff, and yet, like, it's funny. There's Lovecraft never met a what is an adverb that he didn't like. He likes every single adverb. I was listening along, and there's one like probably 2 or 3 page section where he uses the word holy as in WHOLLY, like this is a wholly unsettling. He uses that word like 5 times in 2 or 3 pages.
And he's just going so hard. He's just saying, I can't describe this. Here, let me describe it. I can't describe this thing. It's so iconic and fascinating, and I think it's going to be evergreen for as long as people are interested in horror. I mean, the dude went as hard as anybody ever has. I was looking at the cover too on Wikipedia of Astounding Story, where it was first published. We got to return to that, man. That energy. I mean, Brad, you're wearing your Apocalypse Confidential shirt. Yeah. That's a different vibe, but still like. What's stopping you? Do you need a planet-wide plague to start something? I mean, that's what you're doing, Matthew, with Dark Pony. You're doing the thing, man. It's good. We got to get back to that. Yeah, for sure. Super fun. Brett, you want to tease the After Dark a little more? We got another 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, we got some time. Yeah, we're gonna. Well, so this is the thing. So this story, At the Mountains of Madness. It didn't come out of nowhere, and its influence is actually, if you know how to look for it, is all over the place. So, I mean, some of the things that Lovecraft was inspired by, and he does a brilliant job in At the Mountains of Madness of referencing actual things and fictional things side by side, and it has this effect of making things seem even more realistic. So he references, for instance, Poe's novel Time. I can't, for some reason I'm forgetting the full title. But in that there is a journey to Antarctica, so he's referencing that. But he's also referencing actual Antarctic expeditions that have happened, including by Admiral Byrd. And so he's kind of putting these things, and he's also referencing the Necronomicon, and which is, for people who don't know, is a fictional book in the Lovecraft universe. It's basically a grimoire.
Fictional,
right? But it was then later published as an actual book by Peter Levinda, the Necronomicon.
Necronomicon. Say it with me. Necronomicon.
Necronomicon.
You got it. And the novel you from Poe was nailed it. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket.
That's a beautiful. That's beautiful.
Oh, he's got a copy. He's got a very beautiful copy of the Necronomicon. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, we too are creating our Book of Dead Names on the Art of Darkness podcast at artofdarkpod.com. Yeah. You can go there. How many core episodes have we done now, Brad? 55, almost 60?
55 or 56, something like that.
55 dead souls that we've covered, and Lovecraft chief among them.
Yeah, and let me give you let me finish my After Dark tease. So, things that influenced At the Mountains of Madness, things that were influenced by it. For people who have ever seen The Thing, okay, so the movie The Thing, the John Carpenter film The Thing, that is based on what is the name of there's a 1951 film. I should have had this handy, shouldn't I?
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, no worries.
There's a 1951 film that it's based on, which is also which is based on another story that appeared in Astounding Tales in 1938, so 2 years after Lovecraft's story, which seems to be clearly inspired by At the Mountains of Madness.
Fun.
This whole thing about finding a deep, potentially violent and terrifying secret under the ice into Antarctica, right? This mixture of sort of anthropological and archaeological and paleontological and extraterrestrial themes, and the fact that they're sort of hidden in this mysterious place that's inaccessible and very difficult to get to, right? That's pure Lovecraft. And also Alien, the first scenes in Alien where they go down and they find the egg, and of course the later Prometheus story.
Alien is
clearly like at
100% Lovecraftian business. Yeah, without a doubt.
Right. And so one of the big things that Lovecraft used to create At the Mountains of Madness is he used the records of the expeditions of Admiral Richard Byrd, who is a Navy admiral but also an explorer. In the 40s, Admiral Byrd, so after Lovecraft's death, Admiral Byrd was involved in a number of other expeditions to both the North and the South Pole. And then in the 70s, some weird stuff started coming out about those expeditions in the 40s. And we're going to go into that in the After Dark, patreon.com/artofdarkpod.
Patreon.com/artofdarkpod, and Matthew will come back for the After Dark.
I want to
demand it.
Matthew, what is something in the oh man, I can't. Kevin, what is it called?
Necronomicon, Book of Dead Names.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the actual contents of that book? What's in there?
Oh gosh, I paged through it. I read it a while back. Yeah. I actually bought this for a prop for a show.
Oh, okay, perfect.
But
let's just grab something random from the Necronomicon. Yeah. What are we gonna? What's going on?
We'll conjure something.
I mean, there's like seals and how to summon things, summon demons and summon things.
Yeah, sure.
Book of Entrance, prayers, spells. Yeah.
Wow. Prayers, spells, incantations.
The first name is Marduk.
The first name is Marduk. That's a name of a demon, right?
That is
the Lord of Lords.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
I'm looking at
technically say demon. It just says Lord of Lords.
Lord of Lords.
Oh, yeah. So he created this fictional thing, and then somebody put together like an actual version of it. I mean, you see this on shelves, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have
so
I have
much
a
fun.
little paperback copy of it. It's not as nice as Matthew's edition, but yeah, it's just something I thought I needed to have.
Here's a random thing I found. Kenneth Grant, rest in peace, rest in hell, where he's probably having a great time right now. He'd be a good one, man. I mean, Kenneth Grant is the guy where, you know how in Dante and the Inferno, the first wailing souls he meets are those who were neither, you know, good enough to earn heaven or bad enough to earn hell, and how they're envious
sweet
of everybody
limbo.
else. Yeah, Kenneth Grant is being torn to pieces right now by the devil, and probably loving every minute of it. But in any case, here's what it says. Kenneth Grant, the British occultist, disciple of Aleister Crowley, and head of the Typhonian Ordo Templi Orientis, suggested in his 1972 book, The Magical Revival, that there was an unconscious connection between Crowley and Lovecraft. He thought they both drew on the same occult forces, Crowley via his magic and Lovecraft through the dreams which inspired his stories and the Necronomicon. Grant claimed that the Necronomicon existed as an astral book as part of the Akashic record and could be accessed through ritual magic or in dreams. Grant's ideas on Lovecraft were featured heavily in the introduction to the Simon Necronomicon, and so forth. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the Simon Necronomicon that we're looking at here.
Yeah,
I believe so.
That's correct. Yeah.
I see. So it's a book of magic.
Which was written without attribution by Peter Levinda, who's still around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter, come on the pod.
I've been trying to get him on the pod for years. I've contacted
clearly we need to do a ritual, Brad. We need to go.
We need to summon
contact him on the astral plane.
Right. Well, this is the thing. There's something about in the occult, in the history of the occult, we always see sort of little hoaxes and little misattributions and little things where like, oh, this book is way older than it actually is, right? This is like a recurrent theme. And we see this, I think, even when we talked about Castaneda the other day, there's an element of this too. This sort of, you put a bunch of bullshit between people and the thing, and somehow that adds a certain mystique. It adds the question of whether, do you actually believe it, or are you going to sort of like take a leap of faith on this thing? Are you put off by the fact that maybe it's kind of a hoax? There's something, I think, that adds a little zhuzh to any of this occult stuff. The fact that it's sort of, you know, a bit of flim-flammery, at least on the surface. Yeah.
There's a certain degree they're just trying to sell copies. I mean, they
sold of course,
ton of copies of that sucker. And there's like apparently a ritual where you have to kill 11 people in it to make a knife. It's like, okay,
well,
all right,
skip that one. Is there any that just involve like
banned books?
Right,
like read banned books. Matthew, we're coming in here. We're going to go to the After Dark in 5-10 minutes. Brad really did a good job teasing what he's got. We're gonna read some Metallica lyrics.
I love it.
It's gonna rock.
Yeah.
Tease Dark Pony Radio one more time. Tell people what they can expect if they go now. What do you have coming in the coming season? Yeah, hit it.
So seasons 1 and 2 are available. I think it's a total of 19 episodes, all ranging from 20 minutes to about an hour at the most. It just kind of depends on what you pick. It ranges in horror and your feel for horror. There are some that I don't feel are scary, and there are ones that people have told me they had to sleep with the light on because they were terrified. And I was like, really? Oh, we did something right.
Mission accomplished. Yeah.
The goal is to have something there for everybody. Certain stories.
Cool.
We ended season 2, which I'm very proud. So if you don't know you want to get into it, you want to check out a couple episodes, I highly recommend either Dante's Inferno, part 3, which is one of our top downloaded episodes. Just part 3, not the other 2. I don't know why.
Who knows how
and
this stuff works.
Well, 3 was a hugely important number to Dante's, obviously. So there you go. Maybe that's it.
I mean, that's where we get to the lower hell,
Yes.
the grossness. And then the episodes Lust and Phobia, which are completely original ideas, and they are polar opposites of each other. It's wonderful.
Cool.
And then season 3, we will be starting off. I can tell you our first 2 episodes. We're going to be starting off with an actual retelling of an older Greek myth or Greek lore, and a haunting kind of horror story that we have not done yet. So.
Ooh, cool.
That's just a
It's
tease.
coming up on
in
spooky
October.
season.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're probably
Selling, yeah.
as of right now, we're looking at the end of October.
Perfect.
Stay tuned to the social medias. It might come out shortly, but we might aim for like a Halloween release or a day before that weekend or whatever.
What's the URL? What's the website?
It is shadowhorsetheater.com, and then you can just find it under Dark Pony at the top.
I will put a link to Shadow Horse Theater in the show notes for this episode. Go on, Matthew, you were saying.
Yep. So you can listen to it on Dark Pony Radio. You can find it on where other podcasts are found. You can find it. Yeah. Oh, I should also probably say we have a book too.
Yes.
Oh, you have a book. Cool.
Yeah, we published a bunch of the scripts from
fun.
Some of the popular scripts and some of the original content. So
very
you
cool.
can get that too. I forgot about that completely. Woo.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, rock and roll. Yeah. So it's shadowhorsetheater.com, and it's RE shadowhorsetheater.com. Check it out.
I think to get to the Dark Pony part, I think it is / Dark Pony Radio.
Yeah, it's right there. It's right there
in
the menu.
Thingy is. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't miss it.
And you can listen to all the episodes there. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll
what did you
sure.
come away when you prepared your Dante business? What did you come away?
Me?
Yeah.
Man,
right.
I fell in love with Dante a long time ago. And I read it, and I remember putting it down going, holy shit, this is this is what? I want to do a show. I want to see this on stage. I want to see this in films. So I started trying to find every film, and at that time there wasn't much of anything. And I think the next closest medium that was coming out was What Dreams May Come, which is the farthest thing from Dante you can ever get.
Yeah.
I mean, it's similar, but it's quite a bit far. So it's so I'm always looking for new stories that continue that tale, but nothing's ever really truly hit what Dante hit.
No.
So
he simultaneously did a thing for the first time and just totally mogs everybody who could ever. It really is staggering. I can't say enough about it. And I want to learn medieval Italian.
Right.
Like it's that good.
I actually bought an Italian version while I was in Florence because why wouldn't you? Quick fun note: if you're going to Florence and you go to Dante's home, you can buy kids' books of Dante's Inferno. Actually, the whole Divine Comedy.
That's awesome.
I couldn't find my copies, and you can't order them online. You have to go to the house to get them.
You see this, Billy? Yeah. If you don't shut up, this is gonna be you. You see his mouth? He doesn't have a mouth, Billy.
Yeah. That's right.
You know, timeout. You don't like timeout.
Yeah.
He's on timeout forever.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to close out real quick before we come back for After Dark. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. We're going to talk about At the Mountains of Madness. We're going to talk about its influence. We're going to talk about Metallica. Patreon. Truly, we need your support. We are not joking. Everybody who signs up, everybody who sticks with us, you're helping us grow a show that we hope is already we know for a fact it's already reaching people around the world. People seem to like it. We love making it. We want to do this for a very long time. And the Patreon support is really the anchor that lets Brad and I devote more and more time, bring cool guests on like our friend Matthew here, and think about we already have next year planned. We're not going anywhere. So if you support us, you're gonna see it reflected in the quality of what we do. All right. I guess I'll start with Matthew because he's our guest. Mm-hmm. What's the piece of media that scared you the most in your life?
It would have been film.
Okay, but what a particular film?
A particular film. One of the there's two films actually that stood out, and one of them you're gonna be like, what? And that was Communion with Christopher Walken. And the second one was Jeff Goldblum's or Cronenberg's Fly. And it's not for the things you would think. For Communion, Christopher Walken. It's about it's an alien abduction film where he plays this farmer who continuously gets abducted and then ends up like becoming their friends.
Oh, okay.
It's very weird.
I think I've maybe saw that.
But there's one particular part in that movie where the sounds and the way the creatures move, that not the actual aliens that do the abduction and torture, but the ones that collect him are different. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene where he's sitting in his bedroom waiting for them, and the door's ajar just right, and you just hear the sound approaching, and then you see the creatures come in. The thing was, when I was in my bedroom as a kid, the door would be cracked open the same way every night with the same light coming in that was in that movie. I'm like, I'm fucked.
If that's the vibe you're on, you've got to get your hands on Skinamarink, because Skinamarink is that for the entire movie. It's just that feeling of terror as a kid, and they made it for like $12,000, but and it's divisive. Some people are like, what is this? This is just like long shots of walls. I'm like, yes. That's beautiful. Brad, what scared you the most?
Yeah,
first thing that scared you.
Yeah, the first, I'll give you two. So I'm gonna give you like a real little kid one, and then like a more conscious, not an adult, but like 14-year-old one that freaked me out. So real little one was Disney's Fox and the Hound when they get attacked by a bear. I still have like PTSD about this bear jumping out.
Yeah.
I literally, as a kid, I saw it in the theater, and I went back and looked actually when that movie came out. It must have been like a re showing, because it came out like originally like before I was born. But I dove under the seat in front of us, like crawled under the seat in front of us to get away from this bear at the movie theater. But the thing that really like, and it still kind of freaks me out, is I must have saw it when I was like 14, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And there's something about the way that movie is shot that it is more realistic than any like Hollywood film now, as hard as they make it to like look good and make all the effects right and all of that. There's this moment where Leatherface, I think somebody gets away from him, and he has this moment of like frustration, and he sits down like in his living room with the bones and everything hanging. And it's a moment where you get like a glimpse of him being like an actual person, sort of, but demented. That just lived in my head for so long. Like it really felt like a documentary that I was watching.
Thank you, Matthew Kelly. We really appreciate it, Brad. We'll see you in the After Dark. Patreon.com/ArtofDarkPod. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back.